Hi, this is Amanda.
And this is Jen.
And you're listening to Just This, a podcast that explores everything around being and becoming a mother or parent.
We're excited to have you join us as we dive into the practical details as well as the unseen energetics on topics that span from preconception to years after birth.
Okay, so today we're going to talk about pain, and I was just saying to Jen, I have no idea where this conversation is going to go.
I'm really
excited. It's going to be a fun one.
It's going to be fun. I'm really excited to talk about it, especially in pain in relation to childbirth. But I think there's also pain as a parent that I don't think is actually talked about or even vocalized at all.
Yes.
And specifically, especially after, let's kind of start postpartum and then we'll go back to childbirth, but especially when moms like hear their babies cry. And I don't know if you felt this way, but there's just like something in your body that's like, what do I need to do to make this baby stop crying?
Yeah. Let's start with the word pain, because I am in the camp of let's change our vocabulary around this word. And I feel like you may not be in that camp. So let's discuss. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the movement of moving away from the word pain and replacing it with other words such as intensity, or what are some other words you've heard?
Sensation,
that's another one. So this is something that when I was prepping for birth, I would do this vocabulary changing. And the reason behind it, I get that, see, if you could see Jen's face, there's this like smile on it, kind of, yeah, sure. And it's not to escape the fact that there will be intensity or pain, but it's to rewire our brains around what the actual feeling is going to be and the association of it versus what we've learned pain is. Because in our past, pain has always been associated usually with something that is not
quote
good.
Unquote.
It's, quote unquote bad, that there's something that needs changing, that we need to be healed, we need to be fixed. Pain is as a warning sign to our body that there is something that is not right, that something needs to be put back in balance. I don't know about you, but that's my experience of pain in life.
Yeah, go ahead.
Not medically, like you think about
not
it,
medically,
pain emotionally, you're out of balance,
it's
right?
True. Yeah.
So the idea that pain experienced during birth, yes, we're out of balance. However, it's 100% natural and it's 100% part of the process. And I guess we can relate this back to emotional pain in life and whatever too. But I just feel the reframing of the word to me generally, because when we're thinking about our physical body, the word pain is associated with something that needs to be fixed, whereas in birth, it's just part of the process. So I liked the reframing of it to intensity. And the other thing, I don't know about you, but my birth experience, the pain, quote unquote, didn't feel like other pain. It's a totally different kind of feeling. So, and it's one where there isn't a sense of, at least for me, there wasn't a sense of I wasn't safe in the pain. Whereas I know that might not be everyone's experience through it. However, I think generally it's just a different sensation in the body and feeling in the body than the normal pain we experience physically when something is happening to our body.
Yeah.
I don't know if you would agree with that.
Yeah, no, it totally makes sense. And I think I come from the camp of, why do we just make the idea of pain a bad thing completely? Like, why don't we just kind of accept it for what it is, and changing our perspective or kind of our definition of pain, as opposed to changing the word's kind of the same thing. But if you also think about the word pain, or if something's painful, we're often alerted that, hey, we need to do something, right? Like I cut my hand and it's bleeding. And it hurts. I need to go stop the bleeding, or my stomach hurts. This is not right. So is it a bad thing? Because if we didn't have the pain, we wouldn't know to actually go and do these things, right? And I had a great pregnancy. I don't talk about it a lot because a lot of people don't have great pregnancies. But if there was no pain, would I just continue to like be pregnant and glow my whole life? I don't know. Probably not. But there's this idea that pain is also like an indicator, and it does help create and initiate that change. And I'm just in the camp of, why don't we just think of childbirth pain specifically, not as a bad thing, but as a process, or as a process of that change.
Part of the experience. And
Part of the experience.
I really love the reframing of pain. And this is actually something I have totally had a shift in my relationship to pain in all areas of my life post-birth. Just maybe it's coincidence, maybe it's not. I don't know. I definitely have had this reframing. And there's a book I'll link to in the show notes called Existential Kink, which is it talks about this reframing our relationship to pain in general. And it does bring up orgasmic birth in there as example, and BDSM. I mean, there are these examples where people are rewiring their brains to the experience of pain. I was going to bring this up when I was thinking, we were meditating on, this is going to be a topic, the pain thing, because that can be, again, a whole nother podcast. However, it came up in my mind when I was thinking of orgasmic birth, because I believe there is this misunderstanding around it of, oh, the orgasm is just all pleasure. And I think it's the exact opposite. It's what you're talking about, where someone has wired their brain to feel that sensation, which, if you label it as pain, they're just rewiring their brain with how they respond to that feeling.
Yes.
Versus it actually feels like a massage on your, that's lightly tickling your feet or whatever it is, because that's not the full experience of birth.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things I tell women during labor is really try to sink into it, really try to be with it, and really try to fully experience what that pain is giving you. And at some point when you let go, that letting go process actually does feel really good, because you stop resisting it, essentially, right? If you kind of think about it. And I think there is that spectrum of pain and pleasure. I kind of wonder, is it on that same line? Is it just the opposite ends of it, pleasure and pain? And can we move that line over to a more pleasurable feeling? I don't know. I think in the birth world, there's this huge talk about, don't use the word pain. And I think it's great. I think it works for some people, but I also would not want to be the person like, you're not going to feel any pain at all. I just don't think that's the reality, at least how we communicate the word pain in birth. And there are some, don't get me wrong, there's some women that I would say feel very little pain. I was just talking to a mom, and she said the second time she was in labor, she didn't even know. She said her stomach was just contracting. It's like, wow, that's some unpainful birth right there, if you just only noticed your stomach contracting. So that was interesting. I guess my whole thing about pain and why I like to talk about it is because I think it's just good to just be real about it, and just, childbirth can and most likely will be painful, but it's all based on our perspective and how we perceive it and move forward. And sure, maybe we need to change the wording around it so that we can experience pain in a different light. I'm all for that. And my acupuncture client, there would be, for kids, we use the term taps instead of needles. And there would be adults, I'd be like, can you please just use the word taps instead of needles? And I'm like, of course, if that's what helps you. So I think with your idea of sensations or feelings or intensity, if that like helps us manage the pain and get through it and really be with it, and really kind of sink into it, and then allow that release by just being with it, I think can really help out a lot.
Yeah. It's interesting because ultimately it is just a sensation we are feeling in our body, any pain that we have, when we really get to the somatics of it. And we have these just labels that we use to define different sensations in our bodies. And some people really cling to certain words, just really bring up different thoughts, other feelings, things like
Sure.
that. Just something to practice, maybe even before, well, obviously before you go through birth. Just what is your relationship to these words? And just say different words and see how they feel, and maybe even explore why they might feel you. Could be a great exercise or thing to do, just because it's going to give you more information before you go into the birth. If you do have different sensations that come up in your body or thoughts that come up in your body when you say the word pain, knowing, maybe exploring why those thoughts come into your mind could potentially actually change how you experience your birth, down the road.
I
So
think so. 100%. We also talk about, I took a mindful based childbirth course. I taught it at San Francisco General Hospital. She talks about pain versus suffering. And we tell women in labor, you should not be suffering, right? Like there's no point to suffer. If you're suffering, then go to the hospital and get pain meds, you can get an epidural, right? So there's this whole idea of suffering. And I think it's true even with kids, like relating it into the postpartum period, that it's hard to see our kids in pain, but it is the fact and reality of life. They're going to fall, they're going to get hurt by friends, right? Either emotionally or physically. But I think the worst is to see our kids suffer more so than pain. Pain's more of a temporary thing generally, and suffering is more of a chronic thing. And pain shouldn't be suffering. Pain should be a warning, like for our body, hey, we need to change something, or I need to release this.
something's out of balance is what I always see it.
Yeah, as opposed to suffering. And the other thing too, like with going back to that postpartum period with Eli, with my son, there's this whole idea that when kids fall, you should actually not rush over really, but just kind of go over to them and be by them so that they can actually experience and process what happened to them. And there's this idea that when we interrupt that, we're actually interrupting their ability to process things, kind of allow it to like run through their body. And I don't know what you think about that, but I never really rushed over to Eli so he would fall when he was little and just kind of lay there for a minute sometimes. And some of the falls were, a little intense. I'd be there, of course, but it was interesting to like see him progress through that. And sometimes he'd get up and not even cry, which surprised me. And other times he would. But it's just interesting to see and allow him to actually process and tell me what he was feeling, what he was sensing, how he took that experience on, and then me responding, as opposed to like rushing in and being like, oh, you hurt yourself.
Yeah. This actually, I feel like it was in the Whole Brain Child book. Again, we can link this in the show notes. A great book. The book is more geared toward parenting in the not later years, but just in the overall, like scope of parenting. So beyond baby usually. And it talks about when an event happens and you can help the child tell the story of what happened. So even just sitting with them, oh, what happened? Were you running and then you tripped and you fell? Really just telling the facts of the story and allowing them to retell the facts of the story actually helps them process it too, and not attaching any meaning to it necessarily, but just allowing their brains to learn how to process the facts of a story, feel the sensations in their body, and then move forward from that without attaching any meaning to it. Which is interesting, but I definitely do that. Going back to the pain, there's a couple things that came to my mind that I want to reflect on. First, I love, and I have had people I know afterwards, after birth, they will come and they will say, or I will be talking to them and they'll say, what is this bullshit about no pain during birth?
Yes.
And it is funny that people do reflect that sometimes. I remember somebody who was actually in my mom's circle giving birth the same time I did. And I came out being like, it wasn't painful. It was intense. That was my take on it. This other, like, fuck that shit. It was painful. Whoever said birth is not painful is blown my ear. And it's funny and interesting and great to hear people say that and also be able to laugh about it. I think after the fact, it's a lot easier. The other thing with pain, and it would be interesting to reflect on this too, because with birth, there is this dance of effort and release, birth and postpartum, all of that, there's the dance. And when I think of pain, I can also relate it to exercise, where I remember being told when you're in your birthing process, it's going to feel, there's like mountains. Just imagine you're climbing up to the top of the hill. And then when you reach it, there'll be this breath of relief. And that metaphor worked so well for me, because I could sit there, and in the surge, I literally was visualizing myself with a big backpack climbing up a mountain, and the relief did come. And I remember even saying, you hear about them, but when you're actually experiencing, I'm like, thank God they're here, and they do come. And Mother Nature is designed this whole thing, so you do have these breaks. And however, relating it to exercise brings up the whole exertion versus surrender thing as well. There is exercise pain is something that is technically good for our bodies only to a certain extent. And we want to exert, but not overexert. So I'm interested your whole reflection on this in relation to birth and postpartum and everything around motherhood, because there is this very interesting relation between pain and exertion and surrender, and maybe the unity of all of these.
Yeah. And before I hop in that, I just want to say the other thing I find interesting about pain, especially in childbirth and even as parents, is how we handle other people's pain. And especially as a partner during childbirth, like this is they love each other so much, and not every case, but the really sweet ones. And then one thing I hear a lot from partners is that it was so hard to see you in pain and not be able to do anything. And I think it's if you haven't given birth yet or going too soon, I think it's a good thing to ask your partner or have them reflect on how they're going to be able to handle a loved one being in pain and not being able to really do anything but be there for them. And I think also on that being there for them is really what they need, is just being present with them, which might be go to the next room, grab me water, whatever it is, like give me a massage, look into my eyes. That could look different ways.
And I'm going to cut in here and say this is a great lesson for your relationship for life.
Yeah.
When we're aware of how we're responding to someone else's emotions, this can really play out. So if you figure this out for birth, it can really help in all the other areas.
Yes, I agree. So going back to your, exertion, it's so funny because I ran, and I'm not a runner. I don't consider myself a runner, but I do enjoy running. And there is this point in running, they talk about the runner's high. And really, if I could describe it, it's basically like you're running and you get to this point where you just think, I can't do it anymore. My body is not going to work. I'm in so much pain. It doesn't feel good. But you kind of go past that, and it gets to this point where you're just kind of high, like the runner's high, and you feel good. Like you get in this rhythm, and like that feeling doesn't hurt anymore. And you're just kind of coasting along in the high. And that's what I noticed in the runner's high. When you get to that point, it's also some mental blocks that come up. It's not just the physical, it's also this mental block of things that come up in my head, things I'm thinking about, that start to like slow me down in my running. And once I clear all that away, it's like that high kind of kicks in, and you go, and it feels like you could just go for miles. Are you a runner? Have you ever experienced that?
Yeah. And this is where I think there is that interesting balance of being intuitive, of knowing, am I pushing past this to get to that high, or this comes back to the pain versus suffering.
Exactly.
Pain that I actually can shift my relation to and push a little bit past, or I can totally get through. I'm well prepared. My body's resourced to do this. Or is this a suffering that I'm trying to suffer through?
And this is why I wanted to talk about the topic, because, kind of like what your mama's circle friend said, just basically like fuck that, the shit was painful. And I think, again, like if we need to change the wording around it, I think it's fine. But also, pain is not a bad thing. It tells us a lot. And going back to like really trying to sink in and listening to our bodies, listening to our intuition, and kind of asking ourselves, are we suffering? Is this the type of pain that's quote unquote a good pain? Like when we're pushing past that point to like run longer, is it a good pain because we need to push this baby out because it's time, like baby's ready to come and this is the time to do it? It's not a bad thing. Doesn't feel necessarily the most amazing in our body, but it is telling us something, and it's there for a reason. And we need to kind of, I feel, just shift our minds that all pain is bad pain, because it's not. There is pain that is bad, right? My hand is burning, that's some bad pain. It's not good for my body at all. And people that are born without any sensation to pain, they die young because they don't know that their hand's on fire. They can't sense the heat. So all that is giving us feedback on how to even just survive on a basic level.
Yeah. And coming back to the running, I remember what I wanted to say here. I often like to compare preparation for birth as preparing for a marathon.
Yes.
And so much of it is mental. There's practices you can do. And I think this gets back to the relation to the word pain. And this is something that would be great to do leading up if possible, or even after if you're a parent, because what we're doing and how we're mentally preparing ourselves to relate to these experiences that may come up is going to ultimately be what allows for a little bit more easeful flow through those experiences when you're there, versus the resistance if we've had some mental practice before. I didn't technically do hypnobirthing. I know a ton about, I mean, I know some about it, but I haven't experienced hypnobirthing. But I did listen to some audio recordings to help me mentally prepare of just things of, your body can do this. Your body was built for this. I am in control, or whatever it is, of just things of my body's opening, my body's expanding. I do think those helped. Even the metaphor, as I mentioned, of relating it to exercise or climbing up a really high mountain, of when you're climbing, it's going to feel intense. You're going to feel maybe some pain or whatever it is. And that's part of the process. So I think relating to the word and mentally putting in the preparation and time for that, especially as there is so much in general around our relation to that word in society. And also, I feel culturally, I don't know if I say culturally or whatever, in the media, the way that, pain is related to birth is not necessarily the best representation. The word pain gets this bad rep because of how it's represented and how people then relate to it based on those representations. So,
right. That makes a lot of sense. When you're talking to it, made me think that if we look at pain as a relationship, I think that could be a really good analogy, because in relationships, right, especially romantic or partnerships, and even in friendships and things like that, and relationships with parents and kids, there's always this kind of like up and down, right? There's like these really good times, aka you're feeling a lot of pleasure, and then there's some really kind of dip times where things aren't, feeling so great. And there's these ups and downs of pain. I think if we look at that as a relationship, and just even again, similar in childbirth, where you have your surge where you are climbing your mountain and then you get up there and you get to like take it all in, take the pictures from the top of the mountain and, slide back down and then walk back up to the next one. It just kind of inspired me to think of pain as a relationship.
Yeah, I see them as viewpoints. You're climbing the mountain, vista. You enjoy the view for a minute and then time to keep going.
Time to keep going. The vista, that's better. Yeah, like keeps going up. Yeah, and socially, it's interesting too how we all, and kind of touching back about what you're talking about, it is interesting our social context and cultural beliefs and even potentially religious beliefs around pain and how we interpret it and perceive that. Yeah. And there's a big one too in kind of the, therapy world, that all the pain you caused me made me stronger. That's another one people don't like either. And
I feel the reasoning is it doesn't embody the feminine surrender release. So I really love, instead, what we're trying to say here is reframe your relation to pain.
Yes. Have a new relationship with pain.
Yeah.
Go on a date with it.
Pain. I love that. Go on a date with pain. Light a candle.
Go on a date with it. Light a candle.
Or explore your relationship. Get to know pain in a way. And this can come back to, even to bring in an example, when you're doing peri massage.
Mm-hmm.
Thing we could again do a whole podcast on. If you're not familiar with peri massage, probably there are a decent amount of people out there who are not. I forget, there was another word for it somebody said recently, but it's when you're massaging the perineum area prior to birth. And I remember somebody asking, should it be painful? It's like, there should be a sensation, that it's not the most painful thing. Yes, because that's getting toward, again, relating. How do you feel in your body when that comes up? How is your body reacting? You feel this stretching, this pressure, this new sensation in that area. And we don't need to put the word pain on it. However, these are some new sensations in your body. And are you mentally freaking out? Or are you just processing them? What's going up for you? Another good reason to do peri massage, in my opinion, before you give birth, at the appropriate time, of course.
At the appropriate time.
Don't do it too early. You wait till, you probably know it. Is it 32 weeks?
I think that's the earliest. There's a lot of, there's a lot of
varying opinions.
Varying opinions on that. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, the idea is that some of the massage oils that you can use can help induce, like soften the area and kind of help induce contractions. So you don't want to do it too early. It's kind of the idea. But I don't know. I don't know if I believe that all the way.
Yeah. So this has been a great conversation about pain. Is there any final, I really love where this went. I wasn't sure this was going to go, as I said, the whole context of just reframing our relationship to pain.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think that's the main takeaway, reframing our relationship to pain and understanding, or just acknowledging the difference if something is painful or if we're suffering. Mm-hmm. And I think that's like a good point and to kind of think about. And in a childbirth perspective, you shouldn't be suffering. Ideally, like things, might be sensational, intense, painful, however you want to use it, but it shouldn't really feel like you're suffering through childbirth.
Trusting your body, being able to drop into that wisdom of the body.
Into that wisdom. Yeah.
We're very in touch with actually our intuitive body somatic sense as you get through closer to birth, through pregnancy. Weird thing that happens where you somehow, you probably have better languaging around this, but become more intuitively and somatically in touch with things. Mm-hmm. And after birth as well, there's this, it's as you approach birth, and then slowly, I feel like even years, it's after you leave birth, but you're just kind of like in this more open, more connected, and to really trust that.
Yeah. I think we've touched on that in previous episodes about really dropping into our intuition and really trusting ourselves and our bodies and what it's telling us. So I think it's a good lesson. Not always easy in practice, but definitely worthy of its timing. I don't know. Try to do it. Yeah.
In recap, reframe your relationship to pain. Take yourself and pain on a date.
Yes, I love it. Hey there, amazing listeners. We just want to say a huge thank you for tuning into our convo on the Just This podcast today. We appreciate each and every one of our listeners, and your continued support means the world to us.
If you enjoyed this episode and found value in it, we would be incredibly grateful if you could take a moment to leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform or share this episode with someone you think would enjoy it too. Your reviews and shares not only motivate us, but they also help others discover our show.
We're also all about keeping the conversation going and hanging out with our incredible community. Head over to justthis.site, that's justhis.site, where you'll find additional resources, ways to connect with us, and join the conversation, plus some more goodies.
Thank you again for being a part of the Just This community. We'll be back soon. Until next time, remember to take care of yourself and embrace the wonder as you navigate this extraordinary adventure.